All right, now we can extrapolate a little bit on the simplest formula, which is sort of how we balance our hydration, nutrition, activity, and recovery. So remember again, everything is the concept of all of the same things. So the symbol of the circle and how this proceeds is how we use it for lots of things. Our day flows this way, the year flows this way, but also every 2 or 3 hours flow this way, right? So when we initiate water in a ultradian rhythm phase, we're gaining energy, and then at that sort of peak part of the energy and activity, we start to move into a yin phase where we're more absorbent. So think of this as more output. We're more externally output available. Our energy is towards putting out. And then after about a halfway point, our energy starts to come back, and then more and more until we start to pull in, right? So our nutrients we want really pulling in, and then as our energy is starting to rise up, we're filling up hydration and then our activity. So sort of the most common, if you're able to do it right, or not to do it right, if you're able to do it this way, it tends to be the most common, is our activity. If we think of 2 categories, our physical and our mental, okay? So if we think about this cycle and we have control of our schedule, it might be our physical here in one cycle might be going up, so that our activity is geared with our physical energy, and we're following along with the programs, the day pulls, the qigong, the movements, the check-ins, and our physical energy goes up. So we're focusing on our physical energy being activated, while our mental energy at that time can be a little bit less activated. We're still using our mind, of course. We can check in and focus, but we're not being the leader, and we're not having to decide all the things that we do. We're following along with the videos and the day pulls, so our physical activity is being the leader, and our mental is sort of following along. Then as we go into recovery, into the work cycles, this is the self cycle. We're taking care of our physical health and self. So we move into the serve cycle down here. Our mental energy, we can say, now goes up. So now the attentive focus is on the serve cycle. How can we think and be proactive and use our mind and give out? And then our physical energy is more on the recovery phase, right? So they're balanced. See how we yin yang balance our physical mental energy? So as our physical energy goes up, our focus can be focused on that, and our mental energy can be more passive or follow along with. Then as our physical energy comes down and rests, our mental energy in this loop starts to rise up. So our self-serve cycle, take care of ourself and then serve. So we're balancing out our physical and mental energy. Now this is sort of how this natural loop works. Not everyone can always at all times use this schedule. Sometimes never, right? Everyone works a little bit different. So here's a few ways that we might have to think about and balance this out. If you're able to follow it like this, it sort of takes care of itself. It's the natural yin yang of energy. A more advanced athletic version of this might be, right? So let's just put our circle here, the same concept, right? And so let's continue this, but now let's say you're a pro athlete, or you're in high school, or pro athletes, you're somebody who's able to give all of your effort to your physical. Maybe it's important, maybe it's your job. So your physical energy is up, but your mental activity might be up. If you're a pro athlete and you're doing practice and you're going through drills, you really need to be mentally focused on what you're doing, clued into that, along with physically, right? But then the opposite, something's got to give. So when we go down to the recovery phase, your physical and mental are recovered, right? So this is more of, like I said, a high school athlete where you're really giving a lot and then being able to have the freedom to recover. If you're a parent, this is pretty tough. You usually just don't have time to pull back into the recovery phase unless your kids are at school and you train hard and then you recover. But it's usually predicated on something who has the ability to do this. Now, if someone's trying to do this and need this recovery but can't, that's where you feel overwhelmed, right? So you don't want to push hard physically and mentally all out if you can't equally recover back on the next wave, right? So if you need to be more mentally active, you want to push up physically a little bit to that 2 or 3 intensity, while mentally being able to just follow along, so that when the wave comes down, physically you're resting, mentally you're rising up. Does that make sense? Okay. So these are sort of the 2 physical rises. So the physical energy is going up at the physical time. Now what happens if you have to be, this ultradian rhythm is still cycling, so your physical energy is rising, but you're in a situation where you're sitting or you can't be physically active. Okay, so if this cycle still comes up, because our energy is still going to follow this ultradian rhythm, but our physical energy now, for some reason, during that cycle, whatever it is, we can't be physically active. And instead, we have to be mentally active. Maybe we're at work, we're in transit, we're being a parent at that moment, right? Our physical activity can't be the priority. Our mental has to be, and our physical follows along. In this case, we're going to lean into our play frame, our mindset, and our virtues, of course, virtues, mindset, our play frame, and our postures of power. So how can we use our postures of power, or playing with our posture, right? We call it posture play. So how can we play with our posture and sit up and get ourselves for 15 or 20 minutes in good postural positions? Because that's still following the formula. If we're still hydrating, and then we're moving into a physical phase, but we can't be physical, we can still tap in internally in our play frame and say, how can we get in good posture? Maybe it's proper breathing. There's some things that we can do that's our internal play frame, that we can play with our internal and physical postures, so that we're still checking this. And then when we come back down, usually, let's say, and then our mind now was active and now it gets to rest, and our physical body was sort of having to not move as much, and now it can be active. So this is sort of a reverse cycle. So in this case, when we come back around here and our mind is now resting, but we're more collecting, and our physical active, we can be active in this phase, but maybe in different ways. Maybe it's just getting up, stretching, moving our body after we weren't able to be as active as we'd like to be during that other phase. So if it's just stretching, going for a walk, big breaths, some of our qigong stretches. It doesn't have to be a hard training session. This doesn't have to be a physical training session, but it allows us to move our body and our minds again, so that when we come back around, whatever the next cycle is for us, we're more able. We want to be able to stretch and move our body within every cycle a little bit, even if it's just, walking or standing up and doing a few stretches. And then sort of the other would be, if we're here and let's say we have low physical energy or no ability to take care of our physical energy at that point, and our mental energy is low, or we're not as activated. And then the opposite, at this phase, we might have to have high energy and high mental focus. So this is sort of the inverse, right? This is a little bit harder to deal with because our energies and our ability to use those energies are inversed, right? Like in this cycle, as our activity goes up, our physical energy ability to use it goes up. And as our recovery process goes in, we're able to let our body rest and become more mentally active. And they're in exchange. So these are sort of the 4 phases that you can work through the cycle in different ways, right? And each one sort of has their own challenges and ways to work with it. And the key is we're using our play frame and our mindset. So our growth mindset, we want to be category 1 or category 2. We want to be on the right side. We want to be growth oriented and connected to our spirit. So we know we want to use those and use our play frame to make these, whatever situation we're in, work for us. Okay? And so we can adjust as our intensity goes up or down, our need goes up for our physical activity, our need goes down for our physical activity, our need goes up for our mental, our need goes down for our mental. In these cycles, we can use our play frames and create ways to work through this. So if we can make it through a 2-hour window using these, right? And then we play ahead to the next 2 or 3 and the next 2 or 3, we can interlink our day in ways that we're always physically and mentally both active and passive. And if we can balance out our physical and mental energy at different times, both being active and passive, we can always take what the next phase is, right? If we know that we can take this phase if we took care of the phase before and the phase after. We're always in between 3 phases, right? The phase we came from, the phase we're in, presence, and the phase that we're going to go move our next presence into, which is the future. So this is how we're looking at it, balancing the past cycle, the cycle we're in, and the future cycle using these formulas. Okay, so we can talk about this a lot, but play with this. Use the journal, right, for left and right side. This would be the left side of the journal, and this would be the right side of the journal a lot of times, right? So this is our left side, our day pulls, and this is usually our day trails. Play with that. Play with the formula, see how your different days and different cycles match it. And days that you do really well, notice how good you feel. And on days where you can't do it, or you didn't do it, or chose not to, and you feel crummy afterwards, that's also a win. Take to your journal, write that down, and write how you would do it different next time. Right? What's the one or two things you would do different if a cycle didn't work for you, or you didn't pay attention to it, that you could maybe tweak so that the next time that comes up, you can be in charge of it and have a proactive mindset versus a reactive mindset.